Good evening, brothers and sisters. This is going to be the World Prophetic News. It's pretty late tonight. It's about 11 o'clock. We don't have much news to do today, so let's just get started here. A suicide truck bomb kills 2, wounds 40 in Afghanistan. Coming from the International The News. July 1st. Kandahar, a suicide truck bomb in southern Afghanistan on Tuesday, killed 2 civilians and wounded more than 40, officials said, in the latest attack since the Taliban began their annual offensive. The attacker detonated a lorry loaded with explosives at the gate of the police headquarters in Lashkar-Gah, the capital of volatile Helmand province. Afghan troops and police are battling the Taliban in the first fighting season since NATO ended its combat mission and left local forces to take charge of security. The Helmand blast came less than 2 days after 11 soldiers were killed in a Taliban ambush in the normally relatively peaceful western province of Herat. It was a suicide truck bomber detonating his vehicle at a gate of police headquarters, provincial police spokesman Farid Ahmad Obad told AFP. Our initial reports show 40 wounded, 2 killed, he said, adding that of the casualties were civilians. Provincial spokesman Omar Zwak confirmed the attack. The blast was very powerful. Most of the wounded people are civilians who were hit by broken glass inside their homes, he told AFP. A doctor at the emergency hospital in Lashkar-Gah said 40 civilians were brought to the hospital. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack. You know, I report on this kind of news in the other side of the world all the time. Could you imagine living with something like this next to you on a daily basis? Next up from the BBC News, Ukraine suspends Russian gas purchases. Russian gas purchases have been suspended by the Ukraine after a breakdown in talks aimed at keeping supplies running for 3 to 6 months. The Ukrainian state energy company, Naftogaz, says it would continue transporting Russian gas supplies to other European customers. It will be the second time in less than a year that Russian fuel supplies have stopped running to Ukraine. Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak called the decision unfortunate. Moscow hiked prices after Kremlin-backed leader Viktor Yanukovych was ousted in February of 2014. It cut off gas supplies in June 2014 as the conflict between the government in Kiev and pro-Russian rebels in the east escalated. Since then, the European Union, which mediated at the price negotiations in Vienna, has forged a series of temporary agreements that need to be renewed every 3 months. A statement from Naftogaz said, since the additional agreement between Naftogaz and Gazprom is expiring on June 30th, and the terms of further Russian gas deliveries to Ukraine were not agreed at today's trilateral talks in Vienna, Naftogaz is suspending purchases from the Russian company. Ukraine consumes about 50 billion cubic meters of gas per year, producing about 20 billion cubic meters, but importing the rest. On average, Kiev experiences 4 months a year when the average temperature is below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The two countries have fought several gas price wars in past years, with Russia cutting supplies in 2006 and the winter of 2008 and 9. Next up, 1,200 escaped from a Yemen prison, including Al-Qaeda suspects. Around 1,200 prisoners, including Al-Qaeda suspects, escaped during clashes at a jail in central Yemen on Tuesday, officials said. The incident is the biggest in the series of prison breaks that have freed Yemeni militants in recent years and signals the further erosion of the state amid a raging civil war. Groups of Al-Qaeda supporters today attacked the central prison in the city of Taiz, and more than 1,200 of the dangerous prisoners escaped, state news agency Sabah quoted a security official as saying. Another local official told Reuters some of the escapees were suspected of belonging to Al-Qaeda, but said they left amid heavy clashes between warring militias in the city. Shiite Muslim Muslim Houthi fighters entered Taiz in March in a southward push from their base in the capital Sana'a that drew military intervention from a Saudi Arabian-led coalition. But 3 months of airstrikes have yet to push back the group and units in Yemen's army that are loyal to Houthi Ali Abdullah Saleh, the country's ex-president. The security official said army forces linked to Saleh allowed the prisoners to escape as the militiamen, dubbed popular committees by their supporters, advanced. Heavy fighting took place near the central prison and the popular committees approached and seized control of the area. But Saleh's forces opened the prison doors, the official said. Another group of al-Qaeda militants escaped from a prison in the eastern city of Mukalla in April after army forces suddenly quit the city. Al-Qaeda and other hardline Sunni groups condemned the Houthis as apostates worthy of death, and the two groups are fighting each other in several areas in central Yemen. And the World Post is reporting what Netanyahu really thinks about military action against Iran. Israel's former ambassador to Washington, Michael Oren, is on a crusade to discredit President Obama and derail a possible nuclear deal with Iran. And his new memoir contains interesting information about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's real thoughts on how to stop the Iranians getting a nuclear weapon. In TV interviews and op-eds to publicize his book, My Journey Across American-Israeli Divide, Oren has argued that the main problem in U.S.-Israeli relations since President Barack Obama took office has been a lack of trust, and he puts the blame almost exclusively on Obama. In an interview with Fareed Zakaria on CNN on Sunday, he said, "The president is coming to the people of Israel and saying, 'Trust me.' So we have to address the question of whether that trust has been built up over the course of the last 5+ years of the Obama administration. And having lived through that period, I have to say emphatically, no. But trust is a two-way street, and Oren's book has some disturbing information that should color how we should understand Netanyahu's real intentions. In his book, Oren indicates that both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, then Defense Minister Ehud Barak, who was in office until 2012, wanted President Obama to launch a military strike against Iran. Oren summarizes Netanyahu's view in these words. Netanyahu held that military action would discredit the Ayatollahs, much as the Entebbe raid had helped bring down Ugandan dictator Idi Amin. The President Obama reasoned that airstrikes could not destroy Iran's nuclear knowledge, while the Prime Minister countered that without centrifuges that know-how was useless. A pilot without a plane can't fly, he said. In 1976, Israeli commandos mounted a raid to free hostages from a hijacked Air France plane being held in Entebbe, Uganda. Netanyahu's brother Yonatan was killed in the raid. The Ugandan leader Idi Amin was overthrown by Tanzanian troops 3 years after he launched an invasion of neighboring Tanzania. Oren says Barak advocated a military strike to U.S. officials more than once with the argument that one night of strategic bombing will restore your lost prestige in the Middle East. The Iranian nightmare is a full-blown American attack, he quotes Barak as saying, and adds, but the response Barak received was silence. Netanyahu told the American people when he addressed a joint session of Congress in March that he did not favor military action against Iran, but merely a better deal. We're being told that the only alternative to this bad deal is war. That's just not true. The alternative to this bad deal is a much better deal, Netanyahu said. Now, Oren tells us that Netanyahu and Barak actually wanted U.S. military action against Iran. That ought to have an important bearing on the political struggle that is about to unfold if the United States and its 5 international partners strike a deal with Iran by the newly extended deadline of July 7th. Supporters of the deal will argue that congressional action to derail the agreement by President Obama from implementing, it will lead inevitably to collapse of the international sanctions regime against Iran. The United States, and not Iran, will be blamed for the failure of diplomacy and be put back in a position where the only way to delay Iran's progress toward a bomb, not to destroy, but merely delay for a few years, would be military action. Opponents of the deal, led by Netanyahu and Republican lawmakers, say a better deal was there to be had and could still be achieved if the United States and its partners would only take a tougher stance with the Iranians. They deny that their intention is to create a situation where the United States is forced to take military action. That's where the Oren quotes of Netanyahu and Barak are so important, because they give us insight into the actual thinking of these Israeli leaders. We learned in Iraq that the consequences of military action in the Middle East are impossible to predict. The consequences of the 2003 U.S.-led invasion are still playing out in a region that has been totally destabilized, partially or partly as a result of that war. One thing is certain: hundreds of thousands of people have died and millions have been uprooted by that invasion. Let's not make that mistake again. And reporting from the Sun Herald, in Alabama, a small earthquake was recorded in West Alabama. The U.S. Geological Survey says a magnitude 3.8 tremor was recorded Tuesday morning near Utah, roughly 35 miles southwest of Tuscaloosa. USGS officials say the earthquake happened at a depth of just over 3 miles underground. Officials have said more than a dozen small earthquakes have been recorded since November 20th in Greene County, and each was a magnitude of 3.8 or less. A state earthquake expert has said researchers have installed a seismic monitor northwest of Utah to look for the cause of the seismic activity. And a second earthquake since May rattles lower Michigan. Looks like it's right here. Depth 3 miles, magnitude 3.3. Near Kalamazoo, a shallow earthquake jolted lower Michigan Tuesday morning, marking the second time in 2 months the region, which is fairly a stranger to earthquakes, has felt a trembler. 3.3 magnitude, as I just said. It was quite shallow, only about 3 miles under the surface. And this will be the last news of the day. Greece does default on the IMF debt. Greece's last-minute overtures to international creditors for financial aid on Tuesday were not enough to save the country from becoming the first developed economy to default on a loan with the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. The IMF confirmed that Greece had not made its scheduled 1.6 billion euro loan repayment for the fund. As a result, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde will report to the Global Lenders Board that Greece is in arrears, the official euphemism for default. Fears of a Greek default have unnerved financial markets on concerns that it would ultimately lead to the country's exit from the euro common currency. The fate of Greece's membership in the 19-nation currency bloc still hangs in the balance ahead of a referendum on Sunday, when Greek citizens will vote on whether to accept the austerity terms of continued international aid. President Barack Obama said on Tuesday the financial crisis in Greece should not create a major shock for the U.S. economy, but warned that its fallout could dampen global growth. IMF spokesman Gary Rice said Greece can now only receive further funding from the global lender once the arrears are cleared. He confirmed that Greece asked for a last-minute repayment extension earlier on Tuesday, which the fund's board will consider in due course. The left-wing Greeks government's 11th hour bid for an extension of its international bailout and a 2-year funding and debt restructuring program offered no concessions to creditors' demands for economic reforms, according to text seen by Reuters. A one-page letter from Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis to the chairman of the Euro Group of Finance Ministers of the Eurozone said Greece was fully committed to service its external debt in a manner that secures the viability of the Greek economy, growth, and social cohesion. but it made no mention of the conditions set by Greece's three lenders, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the IMF, for releasing frozen aid to avert defaulting on the IMF payment. Instead, Varoufakis cited legal grounds for requesting a 2-year loan of an unmentioned amount. The loan will be used exclusively to meet the debt service payments of Greece's external and internal debt obligations, he wrote. It was not clear whether that includes payments arrears to Greek government suppliers, civil servants, and others. The letter went on to say, until this loan is agreed and in force, Greece requests for the program to be extended by the Eurogroup for a short period of time in order to ensure a technical default is not triggered. Before the payment deadline, Varoufakis indicated on a call with European counterparts that Athens might scrap the upcoming referendum if a deal was reached, according to Eurozone sources. But the latest Greek proposals came too late to prevent Greece's existing aid package, with locked up funds it needs to pay wages, salaries, and debt, from expiring at midnight. Now Greece will lose access to a 1.8 billion euro loan tranche and 10.9 billion euros for recapitalizing banks. Doors still open? The flurry of diplomacy came as tens of thousands of people descended on Athens' central Syntagma Square over the past 24 hours in two different rallies, one to reject additional austerity measures and the other to push for Greece to agree to the terms in order to keep the financial spigot open. Special. In a sign that European officials have not given up on finding a solution, finance ministers said they would confer on Wednesday over Greece's latest loan request and debt restructuring. It was unclear how much the Wednesday call could achieve. The trust between Athens and European capitals is in tatters after 5 months of acrimonious negotiations, and the relationship further deteriorated after Athens on Saturday decided to put creditors' proposals to a referendum. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has said the plebiscite is the democratic way for Greeks to decide if they will accept more budget cuts and taxes in return for international aid. He has urged a no vote. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has ruled out further negotiations until after Sunday's referendum. Jeroen Dijsselbloem, chairman of the Eurozone's group of finance ministers, warned that Athens was welcome to ask for new aid, but that it would come with conditions. What can change is the political stance of the Greek government that has led to this unfortunate situation, he said, in what appeared to be a further attempt to gain traction with creditors. Varoufakis indicated during Tuesday's call that Athens might urge Greeks to vote in favor of bailout terms if a deal on a new loan was reached, the Eurozone sources said. Yes or no to the euro. Greece has received nearly 240 billion euros in two bailouts from the European Union and IMF since 2010. The money has allowed it to stay afloat, but at a high cost to its population, which has absorbed cuts to pensions, wages, and public services. It is the first time in IMF history that an advanced economy has defaulted on a loan from the world's financial backstop, putting Athens, whose economy has contracted by more than 25% since 2009, in the same bracket as Zimbabwe, Sudan, and Cuba. On Tuesday, Fitch Ratings agency cut its long-term rating on Greece to CC from CCC, saying the breakdown of negotiations had significantly increased the risk that Greece would not be able to meet its debt obligations in the next few months. With its missed IMF payment, Greece is on a path out of the euro with unforeseeable consequences for the EU's grand project to bind countries through a single currency and for the global economy. On Monday, Standard & Poor's lowered its sovereign rating on the country and said the probability of Greece exiting the Eurozone was now about 50%. What would happen if Greece came out of the euro? there would be a negative message that Euro membership is reversible, said Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy, who a week ago declared that he did not fear contagion from Greece. The imposition of capital controls to prevent the banking system from collapsing has given Greeks a bitter foretaste of what could follow exit from the euro. The government began a week-long shutdown of the banks and the stock exchange on Monday. Bank withdrawals are limited to 60 euros a day, and a crisis mentality has gripped the country, with people querying at petrol stations and stripping supermarket shelves bare. So far, there are no problems with suppliers, but if the banks are still closed next week, there will be a bit of a problem if they demand purely cash payments, said Charissos Golos, owner of a small meat and dairy shop in Athens. In Athens, opposition leaders, echoing EU officials, hammered home that the choice facing Greeks in the referendum is whether to stay in the Eurozone or return to the drachma. Even though the EU has no legal way of forcing a member state to give up the single currency. Former Greek Prime Minister Antonis Samaras, leader of the main opposition party, said a no vote would push the country out of the single currency and wipe out wages and pensions. Opinion polls show a majority of Greeks favor holding on to the euro, but the referendum is shaping up to be a close call. Okay, folks, that's going to be all for tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow. God bless.